In this video, we're going to explain how to manage courses, SOMAS maths courses that use Stack and Moodle to run online tests. So we'll just start by going to the initial page here, and I'm going to log in. So to log in here, you use your normal university username and password, and you can see this dashboard page like this. But before going through this, we'll just explain a little bit of background to what the system is and how it works. So firstly, I'll mention that what we're looking at here is version 4 of Moodle. If you used Stack and Moodle in previous years, it'll be in version 3, and you will notice that a bunch of things about the navigation and layout have changed. So what is Moodle? Moodle, it's like Blackboard, a full-featured virtual learning environment, which you can use for all sorts of stuff, like hosting course material or discussion boards or whatever else you like. But we don't really use it for that. We're using Blackboard for everything that Blackboard is able to do. But Moodle is able to host online tests that use this system called Stack for mathematics questions, which can't be done within Blackboard itself. So that's the reason why we have this Moodle server, which is well, the actual hardware belongs to IT services, but there's a virtual server running on that hardware, which is managed by people within SOMAS. Yeah. So as I say, we log in and we see this dashboard page. So lists here recently accessed courses, or we can maybe see some more courses by clicking up here on my courses. And there's kind of an automatic registration system, which is supposed at least to register both staff and students for all the modules that they need to be registered for. So if you log in, you should see any courses that you're teaching. But if you're logging in connection with the kind of Stack training that we're running in July 2022, then well, you'll see that there's this course called MAS 334 Combinatorics Copy. This one here is MAS 334. That's the real course. This is a copy of it. We're just going to use for training purposes. So everyone that registered interested in being trained to use Stack is registered as a teacher for this this fake course here, and there's some fake students as well. And like I say, this is a completely separate copy, so you shouldn't worry about messing things up. You can do some experimentation with this course if you like. So one thing just to point out, so some of you will just be wanting to administer Stack courses. Some of you will be wanting to develop new questions or debug questions that exist already. And if you're thinking that you're going to be editing Stack questions, there's one preference that you ought to set as soon as you kind of log in. You only have to set it once. So what we do, you click on the profile thing here, and then we click on preferences. And then here you've got user account and a bunch of things here, and one of them is editor preferences. And so by default here, it will probably say default. It will say default editor, but that doesn't work very well for editing Stack questions. You should change it to plain text area. So we'll just do that as an initial thing when we first log in. Okay, so now let's go back to the dashboard and we'll look at what we've got here. So we've got the calendar here. The only kind of thing that you'll see in the calendar, here we've got various items about various online tests opening or closing. Okay, this is week one test opening, the week 1 test closing. So you'll notice that these dates don't really make any sense. These are all dates for the online tests, all happening within July. That's just kind of for sake of example for this fake course we're looking at here. Okay, so that's one thing you might use, and then but then what you'll normally do is just immediately click through to the page for some course that you're involved in teaching. Okay, so what have we got here? On the left hand side, you've got this menu with one menu item over here for each online test. In Moodle, online tests are called quizzes, so we'll normally use the word quiz for those things. And so we've got 6 quizzes here, and then they're also listed down the main body of the page. So this link here is the same as this one here, and so on. So there's that, and then there's these menu items across the top here, and then there's also this edit mode toggle up the top. So let's just talk quickly about the edit mode. We can turn editing on like this, and once we've turned editing on, there's a few things we can do. We can add an extra quiz. So we do that. You click add here, and then there's a bunch of different kind of things you could add. But in practice, the way we're using Stack and Moodle, the only thing that makes sense would be to add a quiz. So we click on quiz here, and then there's a bunch of options. But let's just cancel that. And alternatively, you could take a quiz that you've got here. You could move it around. You could hide it, or you could delete it. So those are basically the only things that you might really want to do with edit mode switched on. Okay, so then let's discuss everything that's on this top bar here. So we've got settings. So mostly you don't want to touch this. The settings for both courses and quizzes are mostly managed by a system that we don't use the web interface for. We've got a separate process that runs outside the web interface that sets the main options for each course and for each quiz in a uniform way for all SOMAS courses. And so you probably don't want to change it. Then we've got here participants. Okay, so here we've got the list of all participants. So participants means both students and teachers. So in this case, as I said, for this kind of fake course that we've got here, then all the people that said that they were interested in learning how to use Stack are listed as teachers. And then we've got these fake students, Aaron Adams, Brenda Barnes, Carl Collins, and so on, with usernames fake A, fake B, fake C, and so on. And that's all the participants. Okay, so again, there is an automated process which is supposed to register both students and staff automatically, and you generally don't want to override that usually. In the case of teachers, well, one point is that we do have this automated process, but it never removes people. So you might end up having a bunch of people who are registered teachers on your course who aren't actually doing, in fact, involved in the course this year, in which case you could remove them by hand. There are these little kind of bin icons that you can use to remove people over here. And occasionally there might be people involved in teaching who for some reason are not registered in the SOMAS database in the most obvious way, in which case you might have to manually add them as teachers, which you can do using this enroll users button up here. The students, if you see that if there's something that seems to have gone wrong with the automatic registration of students, then it's best not to mess with it, but you should consult with me, Neil Strickland, the SOMAS Information Manager, and I'll sort it out. In particular, sometimes you might get a message from a student who's just joined the course and wants to be added immediately, but that usually causes more trouble than it's worth. So you just wait a few days for it to come through the automatic system. Yeah. So if you've got a course with a very large number of students, then you might want to some help in kind of finding an individual student. Which the simplest way to do that is to use these bars here. If we click on H here, we just get the people whose surname starts with H, and there's only one of those in this particular case, or we could B or something. Okay, so here now we've got people with first name starting B and surname starting H, and there aren't any. There's one person whose first name starts with B. Okay, so that's the simplest way to find people in this list. And then we click on the name of the student, and we get a page with a bunch of information about that individual student. We'll get back to looking at this kind of page later on in this video. Then there's some further icons over to the right hand side here, and they're generally not useful. Okay, so that's everything we need to say for the minute about the participants list. Let's go here to grades. Okay, so yeah, so we need to. There's this drop-down menu here which currently says grade a report. You might find that when you first access this page, it says something different. If it says something different, you need to change it to say grade a report. In particular, you might find that when you first visit, it gives you user report. User report is telling you about your grades, the grades that you've earned as a student on this course, which is usually, of course, not a relevant thing. So we go to grade a report here. So same kind of menu bar for choosing individual people, and we've got we can click on the name of a student to see a more detailed view. We can click on the student's result for a particular quiz, like this one, and this gives us a way of reviewing everything that individual student did on this particular quiz. We'll have a closer look at those kinds of pages later. So another thing you might want to do is you might want to change a student's mark for some reason. Okay. Now, usually you don't want to do that on this page. We'll mention. I mean, here you see that there's this one mark here that's marked with this kind of tan light brown background. That's a mark that has been changed manually. If you did want to do that, you go up to this edit mode switch up here. Now it's possible to enter a new mark. It was 4. We could just enter 5 as their mark for that grade there, and there'll be a. Actually, let's not do that. Okay. So, like I say, it is possible to do that here, but generally not a good idea. So, I mean, why would you want to change someone's grade? Firstly, there might be some. We've got the kind of code, software programs that mark individual questions, and there might be an error in that code. But if there is an error, you generally shouldn't want to be changing marks individually. You should go away and fix the error in the coding, and then there's a way to rerun the whole marking process, and then any students that are affected by the error will get their marks corrected. And failing that, if there's a reason, to sort of change mark for an individual question, then there's a way to do that we'll see later, where you attach the change to an individual question rather than to the quiz as a whole. So there's not many circumstances in which you would want to sort of change the overall quiz mark without changing an individual question mark. But if for some reason you did want to do that, then this is where you'd do it. Then there's a bunch of other things that you could select from this drop-down menu here. But I think the only one of them that's really likely to be useful is the export, which is the bottom entry here. And if we click on that, then there's a bunch of options that we could use to export the marks in some format. You should notice that the default export format is open document spreadsheet, which is almost certainly not what you want. You can either choose an Excel spreadsheet or a plain text file. Those are much more likely to be useful. So I think, so that's everything we want to say about this grades item for the minute. And then there's also reports. We've not, so far at least, we've not found these reports to be useful. And then also these items under more, none of those have been found to be useful so far. So that's everything we want to say about the course page. So now let's go on and look at the page for an individual quiz. Okay, so here's the week 1 quiz. So what have we got here? So again, we've got edit mode up the top. There's not really anything useful you can do with the edit mode. There's this menu bar across here. We'll look through these options in a minute. There's a preview. So here, because I've previewed this quiz before, it says continue the last preview. but normally it just says preview the quiz. And there's a button here that you can click attempts. That will show you all the attempts that students have so far made at this quiz. Actually, clicking on the attempts there is the same as clicking on results up here. And that's basically it. So if we click on continue the last preview, so here you're seeing something that's more or less the same as what the student sees when they attempt the quiz. There's a few kind of extra options because it's a lecturer's preview instead of actually being a student attempting the quiz. So then again, we have settings here. So again, most of this you don't want to change. It's set in a uniform way for all quizzes on all SOMAS courses. You might want to change the name, I guess, if you're reorganizing things a bit. You might want to change the timing. So under timing, you've got the time when the quiz opens, time when the quiz closes. Now, we do have an efficient means for setting the timing, which you can record that you want the week 1 quiz to open on the Monday of week 1 at 9 AM, and we've got a system that knows how to decode that in terms of the academic calendar and set the dates correctly. So typically, if you want to make changes that are persistent, that are going to be carried forward to the next year, or if you want to make changes to a whole bunch of quizzes, then typically you should talk to me about the way to do that, not through the web interface. So the only other thing that you're most likely to do, it can happen, of course, that you want to give all students on a course an extra few days if there's been some kind of disruption. So for that, you would just change the closing date here. If it's just a matter of giving extra time to individual students rather than to the whole class, there's a different mechanism for that that we'll discuss later. Okay, and then other stuff generally you shouldn't need to change. So now let's look at this questions. Okay, so here we've got a table of all the questions in this quiz. Notice this quiz, we've had some attempts by students fake students, but the system doesn't know that. We've had fake attempts by fake students to do this quiz, and because of that, you're not allowed to, there's a bunch of changes you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to add or remove questions. You're not allowed to repaginate or change the order or anything like that. You can edit individual questions in case you need to fix errors in the marking code, for example, but generally most things, overall structure of the quiz can't be changed. We could look instead at the week 3. Here, this quiz hasn't opened yet, and so we're free to add or subtract questions or change the order or various other things. Okay, so let's look what we've got in this table. So here we've got 10 questions. So you'll see most of them have this little kind of flashy symbol on the left-hand side. That indicates this is a stack question that uses the stack plugin to mark mathematics questions in an intelligent way. There's a couple of exceptions to that we've got down at the bottom here. The very bottom one is just a true or false question that doesn't use stack. So it's not really recommended. I mean, stack is, in a sense, massive overkill for a true or false question, but it does keep everything tidier and more consistent if we use stack for it anyway. In question 9, you see that's got this little dice icon. So that's again a slightly different thing. So here there's actually sort of 3 different stack questions, and we want to choose. Each student is only supposed to see one of them, chosen randomly, and we'll discuss a little bit later what's the mechanism for setting that up. And again, while you can do that, it's not really the most recommended thing to do. It's better to include the randomization within the code of a single question. That again keeps things tidier and more consistent and generally more powerful. Then the other questions, they're all just stack questions. So we can, if we click on this little gear wheel, then we get to the page for editing a stack question. There's a huge amount to be said about that process. For the moment, we'll defer that. And then there's also this kind of magnifying glass icon here. That's what we use to preview the question. So we saw before about previewing the whole quiz, but you can also preview an individual question. So how many? So we can try entering an answer here. It's going to be the wrong answer. This is not a particularly intelligent wrong answer, so it's just telling us that it's incorrect. If you had one of the more standard mistakes for this question, then it would give you a more interesting response. But here it's just something that's completely wrong, and so we just get a message that it's incorrect. Yeah, and then you could delete a question, or you could use this use this button here to add a new question if you want to. And here we've got the results. Okay, so there aren't any results yet for the week 3 test because no one's tried it. So let's go back to the week 1 test and results here. Okay, so at the top here we've got this drop-down menu. So normally it says grades. This is kind of the thing that you most naturally want to look at. There's a couple of other items here. Item which says responses, not terribly useful for us, and manual grading is not terribly useful. Statistics and stack response analysis, so we'll have a look at those later. They can be useful. So normally you just get this table here showing all the individual students and their marks on each individual question. And we've got a little bit of statistical stuff down at the bottom. So so if we want to look at an individual student, we can click on Review Attempt. This gives you a page with quite a lot of detail about everything that they did on this particular quiz. Or if you just want to focus on an individual question, you can click on the mark for the individual question, and you'll get the history of their responses to that individual question. Yeah, and then you might want to download the marks for an individual quiz. So there's this download button here. There's several different formats that you could ask for, but comma separated value file is the one that you probably want. And here we could also, instead of grades, we can show statistics. Does more or less what you would expect. Got a bunch of kind of statistical summaries of the shape of the grades, and got some, and then we've got again statistics for each individual question that you might be interested in. And up here we've also got stack response analysis. And so well, this again requires quite a lot more explanation. This gives summaries in all sorts of different formats of different types, specific answers that people gave, and various kind of ways of analyzing what the type of answer was, and what they did after they received certain kinds of feedback, and how long it took them between for the first attempt or between other attempts, and so on. So a lot of information here. There'll be a separate video to explain how to deal with that. And then here is a thing called Question Bank. Question Bank, the way we've organized our questions, it's not typically useful. That's the only reason why you might The main reason why you might deal with a question bank is if you want to do random questions. So let's go back to week 3 again. So question bank for week 3. You can see if we look at categories. So the category that's called default for week 3 with 9 questions in. And for most tests, most quizzes, you'll only see a category like this. There's for week 1, there's a category called default for week 1. All the questions are in that category. There are no subcategories. But in this case, we've done something a little bit different. We've created a subcategory called addition. And this has got 3 questions called addition 1, addition 2, addition 3, which are all basically the same, but just slightly different parameters. And then if we go back to the questions here, okay, there's question 9 is this is a random question, and the way that random questions work is that they're attached to a category. So this random question is attached to the addition category, and so each student will get one randomly selected question from the addition category. So yeah, you might want to try doing this, but it does kind of interact a little bit awkwardly with some other stuff that we do about the way we organize our stock of questions. So like I say, it's generally preferred to sort of write the randomization into a single question rather than choosing randomly from a set of questions. And then for a few courses, we've done a bit more organization in the question bank. We've sort of divided questions up according to which chapter of the lecture notes they're relevant for. Again, that does interact a little bit awkwardly with some other stuff that we do about organizing questions, but that's actually a problem that really ought to be fixed. Probably will get fixed at some point. But for the moment, we're not usually organizing questions into sections of the course or anything. We just organize them according to which quiz they appear in. Then we've got this item at the top here which says more, and under that got an item which says, I think most of these items are not have not been found to be useful, but there is this one called overrides. This is the item that we use if we want to give an individual student extra time on this quiz. So we would then click add user override. We would find a user, Eric Evans maybe, and then we could set an individual deadline for Eric Evans if they have some extenuating circumstances or something. Should be aware of how that interacts with the display of solutions and things. If we give Eric Evans an extra week, well then when Eric Evans logs in and accesses the test, it will still be open for him and he won't see the solutions. But the test will have closed for all his friends and his friends will have seen the solutions. So you have to make a judgment about how to deal with that. Okay, so now let's go back and just say a tiny bit more about the information page for individual students. And so here we're looking at the page for our first fake student, Aaron Adams. So what might you want to look at here? One thing that you might look at is the logs, either today's logs or all logs. So this is an extremely detailed log of all interactions that Aaron Adams has had with the Stack system. If you have some student who's sort of disputing something about how the quiz operated, or reporting some kind of technical difficulties or something, then sometimes it's going to be useful to look at this log of their interactions. Or you might see grades overview, overview of what grades they've had on individual quizzes and so on. Now, there's another box that might or might not appear around here. You see, I'm at the moment logged in just as myself. I'm also able to log in as an overall administrator. If I log in as an overall administrator, then I see a box here which will allow me to log in as this student and see exactly what they would see. So for some purposes that might be necessary. If you feel the need to do that, well, yeah, you can ask me to do that with my kind of super user powers, or I might be able to give you the relevant permissions. Not really come up yet. And then there's not really anything else on this individual user page that we've found to be useful. Now let's have a look again at the quiz preview page. So, so again here, this is more or less what the student will see. Here we're seeing this is this quiz has a number of pages. If we click this up here, we'll see that there's actually 8 questions on this quiz, and we're only seeing the first 3 of them. There's a button for the next page button down the bottom. It's necessary to split quizzes up into pages with only a few questions because for some reason the MathJax, which converts the LaTeX to sort of to nicely displayed mathematics HTML, that seems to run extremely slowly within Moodle. And so if you've got a page with a large number of questions, large number of formulae, then there's a big delay in them being rendered as proper mathematics. So for that reason, we like to make sure there's not too many questions per page. And so yeah, so we see the text of the question and the answer box as the students will see. You get these kind of messages up here: tidy stat question, missing tests or variants. This warning message is in relation to an issue that we've not found to be significant. So you can just ignore that warning message. And over here, there's a button that we could use to edit the question. So as I said, we'll have a bit of a review of the question editing page later. There's a button you can use to flag the question. We've not been using that. We don't really know what's the use of it. So here we can enter an answer. Let's try and answer 111. Okay, and so this is this case 111 is one of the standard mistakes for this question, and you see that the system is giving us a sort of tailored feedback. It kind of makes a suggestion which the students can read, and hopefully it will lead them to understand why this answer is slightly wrong. So we change it to 112, and it tells us the answer is correct. Notice the way the marking works here. The way stack marking works is almost never give kind of partial credit for partially correct answers. You only get credit for getting the answer completely right. But you're as we just did, we had 2 attempts, and students are allowed to make as many attempts as they like, but they lose 10% of the marks for each incorrect attempt. So here we got this wrong once, and then we got it right the second time, so we get a penalty of 0.1 marks for the first incorrect attempt, and so we get 0.9. And so so all of these so most of the questions have a single answer box. So this last one, there's actually 5 parts to it, 5 separate answer boxes. Can maybe look at a different quiz that has different types of questions. So this is a different type of question where we're supposed to assemble a proof by clicking these items on the bottom panel. So let's do this quickly. Okay, so there's an attempt to prove this, and we click on check, and it explains why this explains why our answer isn't quite right yet. And well, you'll have noticed that there was a little bit of a delay with the this mathematics rendering correctly, and as I mentioned earlier, those delays will mount up if we have too much stuff on the page. Then here's a multiple choice question. So I can't. So here we click an answer to that. So this particular multiple choice question is not telling us not giving us any interesting feedback. It's just telling us the answer is incorrect. I can't remember if there's let's maybe see if we could. So this question 5 here, this is a little bit more interesting. Here, this is a multiple response question. So there's got 6 items here, 6 items, and we have to check which ones are correct and which aren't. So let's try something randomly. Let's just check it. Check a couple of those. We click check. It takes a minute to think, and okay, so the way these multiple response questions are typically set up is like this. So we were correct in saying that A should not be ticked, and we were correct in saying that B should be ticked. The first thing where we made an incorrect judgment was in item C. So here we see an explanation of why we shouldn't have ticked item C, and it does say here in brackets that there may or may not be other issues with the answer as well. The system is not commenting on whether we should or should not have ticked D, E, and F. It's just going to explain why we were wrong in ticking C. And so we fix that. Yeah, and so hopefully, of course, the student will fix the thing that you just told them was wrong, but then they'll also read the feedback and then think about it, and then maybe check their answers for the other things. But let's not do that. Let's just do the most obvious fix and click check again. And now now it will give us another item of feedback which we can incorporate. Okay, so that was the quiz preview. Now let's look instead at reviewing the results obtained by a student. So I'll go to Diana Davies maybe. So you'll see that this review page is quite similar to the preview page we were looking at a minute ago, but it has the students' answers rather than boxes for us to enter our own answers. These input boxes are they're disabled. We can't change them. So yeah, you see that this is the last answer that the student entered. We go down to response history thing. You'll see previous answers. Right, so this response history table a little bit indigestible, but if you look at it carefully, and there's a bunch of steps. It's the ones that say submit here are the only ones you really need to look at. This one here, it says answer 901, which was incorrect, and then answer of 91, which was correct. So, so I got a score of 0.9 for that. And you'll see also that it was manually graded, that we decided for some reason to change the mark from 0.9 to 0.95. You see the comment about that up here as well. Again, here we've got we look now at the second question. Again, the student submitted an incorrect answer here, and then after that a correct answer, and now they've so they will get penalised by 0.1, got an overall mark of 0.9. And if we again wanted to be more generous, then we could override the mark by clicking on this this part here. But as I mentioned previously, if there's actually a mistake in the code that does the marking, then you probably don't want to be fixing individual marks for individual students by hand. You should instead fix the marking code, and then there's a process for regrading the whole quiz. Yeah, so actually we didn't mention that previously, so maybe we should do that. Yeah, so if we go to the results page here, yeah, if you've changed the marking process for a question and you want to rerun the marking, then you can click these buttons here. But you should note though that regrading can be really quite slow. It might take really quite a long time to regrade a question. And in fact, also you can't regrade an individual question. You have to regrade the whole quiz. Okay, so now we're going to have a brief look at the page for editing a question. This will be discussed in more detail in a separate video, but we'll have a brief overview here. So let's maybe look at this question here. We've got sections here: general, input, potential response tree, options, and tags. Tags we can completely ignore, options we can almost ignore. This is one tiny point to make mention about that. The main thing are these first three things here. And then, of course, at the bottom we've got this link for saving the changes and a link for previewing the question. So we look in the general. Okay, there's the tells you which category the question's in. You can't change that from here. Tells you the question name. So question name, it's not shown to the student, so it doesn't matter if it tells you if the name of the question makes obvious what the answer is. Then here you've got the question variables. Okay, so this is a block of Maxima code. Maxima being the computer algebra system that does all the real work behind the scenes for Stack. And so we've got this question variable section that kind of sets up everything for the question. So in this particular instance, we're just simply setting some variables. There's no real programming or logic here. n:7. So in Maxima, assignment operator is just a colon. So n:7 just means you're defining n to be 7, and defining TA to be this sequence here, and BS you're defining to be this this thing. So this uses the sconcat function, which concatenates strings. One point to notice here, this variable is called TA. TA stands for teacher's answer. So it's a kind of standard convention that the correct answer for the question should be, at least reasonably often, gets assigned to a variable that's called TA. Then there's this random group thing. We're not using anything like that. We never use that. Then there's the question text. So this is the text of the question. So notice there's some HTML stuff just for layout. We've just got some HTML line breaks, and bracket B to put a certain thing in bold. So we can use LaTeX for mathematics. You can't use LaTeX for layout, for bulleted lists or anything like that. All the layout has to be done in HTML. And then down here, we've got some explanation for the students of stuff that they might be thinking about typing. So stuff that students type, you should put it in pointy brackets code here. That just puts it in a different font, which kind of makes it easy to distinguish stuff that students are expected to type from other things. Notice here I've just got like just a plain text editing box. If you remember at the beginning of this video, we explained about how to set your editor preferences. If you set your editor preferences differently, then you get a kind of HTML editing box here, which doesn't really work very well with the other Stack-related stuff, so we shouldn't do that. And up here, we've got some LaTeX. That's enclosed in \open bracket \close bracket. Doesn't work to use $signs. You have to use \round brackets for inline LaTeX and \square brackets for displayed equations. Then inside we've got this kind of curly bracket @ symbol. So that's used for referring to Maxima variables. So we defined a Maxima variable called BS here, and we want to refer to that. So we use this, put it in curly bracket @ signs down here. Here we've got this HTML format, you never want to change that. Question status might be useful, but we haven't been using it. Yeah, we just leave the question status as ready. Default mark, again, there's not much gain in sort of trying to specify different marks for different types of questions. We always just leave the default mark as 1. Specific feedback, again, you kind of don't really need to worry very much about what goes in this box. This thing here, so feedback :PRT1, that gets filled in automatically, and there's no reason to change it. Penalty of 0.1 for incorrect attempts. Again, we usually leave that as the default. The only exception is if you've got a multiple choice question with a very small number of options, or if you've just got a true or false question, then it might make sense to have a penalty bigger than 0.1. But normally we just leave it at 0.1. Then we've got this box which says general feedback. So that's kind of a slightly funny word for it. I mean, what actually goes in this box is just the worked solution. So if we decide to provide a worked solution for a problem, then you put it here. You don't need to just kind of put the answer. If the only thing you're going to give the students is what's the correct answer, well, they'll be told that sort of automatically without having to fill in anything in this box. But if you want to provide a more detailed argument for why it's the correct answer, then you would put it here. The ID number, again, yeah, that's a mechanism that we haven't been using. It might be useful for some purpose, but we haven't used it. Question note. So this is only useful in the case of questions that involve randomization, which this question doesn't. But in the case of questions that involve randomization, you need to put something in the question note box which distinguishes between the two different versions of the question that are randomized differently. Let's see, I can't remember if we've got a good example of that here. I think not in this quiz. So this is an example with a proof question, and the only thing that changes in this, the only thing that gets randomized in this proof question is there's a whole bunch of phrases that the students are supposed to choose from, and they get presented in a random order. The order is controlled by a randomly chosen permutation, and we need to record what that permutation is. The code up here, this line in the code sets the variable perm to be equal to the permutation that's used to shuffle the options, and then we have to record that by putting an appropriate thing in the question note box here. Let's go back to a more standard question. Yeah, so we get an input section for each input box that the students see. And so here, this one, the main thing to look at is the input type. So in this case, it's numerical, which you might think means that the students have to enter a number. It's not actually quite what it means. In fact, it means that the student's answer is not allowed to involve any variables. It is allowed to be like a set of numbers. It is allowed to be an expression like pi squared or pi squared over 6 or something. But it's not allowed to involve x or something like that. Then you have the model answer. Model answer, that's the answer supplied by the teacher as being correct. It has to be a correct answer. It doesn't matter if there's lots of different correct answers, you just only need to supply one of them here. Then you get to specify the size of the box which the students get in which to enter their answer. It doesn't matter if their answer is longer than that box. It just means that it's not so convenient to type it, but it won't actually cut the answer off. Then there's a whole bunch of other options that we're not going to explain just here. Then we get the potential response tree. Okay, so the key thing here is we've got this feedback variables box, and feedback variables box contains maxima code that determines whether the student's answer is correct, and generates feedback. And the way we normally set up the questions, basically all the work happens in this box. And then we have this potential response tree now, and you've got a little diagram here that shows the structure of this potential response tree. But with the way that we've set things up, this is the most simple kind of tree that you can. There's kind of one branch for the correct answer and one branch for incorrect answers. And the feedback just refers to the variable that was set up here, which contains the feedback. Now, it is possible to set up questions with a kind of complicated tree of possibilities here, where the marking logic is embedded in the potential response tree and not in the feedback variable section. We found that not to be very convenient. We normally do everything, all the logic is in this box, and you have this kind of very simple and standard potential response tree that's shown here. Yeah, there's options. Basically everything here can be ignored. There is just this point that there are all these hints which contain actually no information at all. They kind of exist for a technical reason, and so they should be left in, but I'm not going to explain exactly what that technical reason is. And then the tags, we're not doing anything with the tags. Then I'll just mention that we've seen before about previewing a whole quiz. We can also preview an individual question. Clicking here, so when you preview an individual question, you get it as a pop-up box. It's pretty similar to what you see when you preview the whole quiz. Just a couple of extra things. One is that here we get this button, fill in correct responses. So you fill that in, and you get the correct answer gets filled in there. It doesn't get submitted, so it's quite often convenient. You fill in the correct answer and then you modify it somehow, and then you submit it. Then there's this preview options here. This box here needs to say adaptive mode. It's slightly confusing about how defaults are set here. Occasionally it might be that you have to actually manually change that to adaptive mode, but it should be like that usually anyway. And then there's display options. It's got all these boxes here. Again, it's best if you change all of these boxes to say shown, which is what it says at the minute, but you might find yourself in a situation in which these boxes don't say shown, in which case you change them and then you click update display options. Then there's this box down here which says technical information, which that says this question summary. You might that's actually not terribly useful. So sometimes some things under this technical information are useful, but in this particular instance, not really. So that's basically everything we're going to say about Stack and Moodle in this video. There'll be separate videos. Well, one certainly where we talk in more detail about how to code the marking logic or the question setup logic for Stack questions. That's a big topic on its own. And there'll be also another video in which we explain how to review what students have done on a Stack quiz and really zoom in on details of common errors and the way students have reacted to feedback and so on. But that will be enough for this video.